Welcome to Five Questions. We're glad to have Chris Stevens with us today, who is a minister in Temple, Texas. And Chris and I went to the same school, graduated from the same school. And he's here to talk about race relations in America. A hot topic, something that we should be talking, something we should have been talking about for a long time, not just now. But it's on everyone's minds. But before we get to that, Chris, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Well, I'm originally from Temple, Texas, same place in which I minister now. I minister at the Avenue G Church of Christ. Went to school, as you stated, at Austin Graduate School of Theology, and I'm currently there enrolled in the master's program. Yeah, that's pretty much. Oh, I've been married for about, was it 13 years? It'll be 13 in July 9th, and I have three daughters and one more daughter on the way. We tried for that boy, but four daughters in a little bit.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I know we're going to start out strong here, or heavy here. Everybody knows about George Floyd at this point, but I just want to get your thoughts and feelings. I haven't even asked you yet. Did you watch the video? I know some people didn't want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just what were your thoughts and feelings as you watched that and kind of saw the events surrounded by that?
Well, when I initially saw it, of course, I saw it through Facebook, and I'm just scrolling, and I see it wasn't the whole video. There's two videos out there, and one shows the whole thing, which it was quickly taken down, and then the other one shows just a portion of it. But as soon as I saw the officer with his knee on his back, I didn't finish watching because I already knew it. I was like, well, in my mind, since I saw it on Facebook and it was being posted like that, I said, okay, this man is not living anymore. That was my first thought. I was like, he's dead. They're posting it, and there's about to be a lot of mess behind it. My first thought was not this. I was just like, not this again, But compared what I did whenever I saw the video, I noticed that the same shock that existed, when I saw other videos, and heard about other things like Trayvon Martin, that was more shocking then than this was, and I don't know if that's because maybe I'm becoming desensitized to seeing it. I don't want it to be that way, but I think I might be becoming desensitized to seeing it. But as soon as I saw him kneeling, I thought to myself, not this again. I turned it off. I kept scrolling, and I immediately thought, this is not going to end well. That was my immediate thoughts, because I'm just like, it's going to be a mess on social media. It's going to be a mess in this country right now. It was, people already stir crazy because of the pandemic. I was just like, it's not going to go well, basically.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about we have to be cautious of becoming desensitized to this, because what was it? It was just 2 or 3 weeks before where we saw the Ahmaud Arbery video,
Yeah.
And so it's just, within just a few weeks, we're seeing something very similar in nature. And I think
it was especially pressing for where I am here, because it was not too long ago. I want to say it was at the beginning of this year. It couldn't have been at the end of last year, but we had a young man by the name of Michael Dean, who was shot and killed by a police officer in what should have been just a normal traffic stop. And that thing went on. They brought the Rangers in to do the investigation here, and it's still not yet solved. So I was just like, man, this isn't going to be good for Temple, So it was, yeah.
Wow. And again, another heavy question, and I know this question is big. Uh,
Yeah.
what's it like to be Black in America? I mean, I know there are books been written on this, but
Right.
in a few moments, maybe give your experience and answer that question for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. I was like, man, when I saw that, I was like, that's a broad question, man.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I think that there's a belief that there's a spokesperson for Black people, like it's either like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or something. But I think everybody's experiences are different, uh, depending on where and how you were raised, where you grew up at. I've been exposed to some things in my life to where I've seen the not so good side of things. With my father, um, formerly sold drugs and used to be on drugs at one point in time, and living in public housing and going from that to also later on in my life, as a teenager, parents, getting things together and living in a suburban area or whatever you want to call it. So I've seen both sides of it, and I can say that it's a bit frustrating. It's exhausting at times. I was thinking about this question, and we had the conversation yesterday after I got done preaching. We were sitting around talking in the auditorium, and I was just like, man, it's like you wait so long for something to happen. You see some semblance of justice and some semblance of equality coming, and then it just gets taken away. When you think about it, Black people in America, we come over, they're enslaved in like 1619, right? And that's like over 400 years. And 1865, I believe the Emancipation Proclamation was about 2 years before that. Then 1865, you have it to where there's this semblance of freedom, right? But they're free, but they're not really free. There's these things that come about where they have the vagrancy laws. Like if you're homeless, you go to jail. But well, if you were just set free and you weren't given anywhere to live, of course you're going to be homeless. So you go to jail, and then you're doing the same thing that you were doing when you were a slave. And then if you do go about getting a job, you're sharecropping, which you're doing the same exact job that you were doing when you were a slave, and you have a home that's on someone else's land. Um, you fast forward 100 years later, 1965, Black people are allowed to vote, and it's like you have this thing to where you believe that people are given the ability to finally be citizens, but then you have voter suppression, things like that happening, and Jim Crow era. And then you look at it, and it's like Black people in America have a history of saying, "Hey, just wait, it's coming. Freedom, equality is coming." And then when it comes, it's not the way they're supposed to look. I remember having a coworker who did what was that thing called? Where you trace your ancestry. Um,
Oh yeah, the ancestry.com
I
or
guess it's Ancestry, yeah, Ancestry.com. And he traced his ancestry all the way back and found his family crest. I'm like, man, that's awesome. So I did it, and I didn't think about it before I did it, but I did it. It only goes back so far.
mm,
And so you have this people in America to where you can only be traced back to when your ancestors belonged to somebody else. You don't have a culture that's tied to where you're from. You don't have a language that's tied to where you're from. The family structure of Black people was somewhat destroyed in slavery, with the separation of fathers from their families. And I think that it still exists today. You have no generational wealth. You know, there were people who migrated to this country who were given land and given the opportunity to build up something, but that doesn't exist. And it's like you Black people are here in America, and it's like, hey, help yourselves out. Come out of what you're in. It's like we don't have anything to work with. So it's frustrating in that sense. And then when things like this happen with Floyd, it's just like, okay, you you you're scared for those who you love that are black males, but at the same time, you want to try to put on a mask so that you don't upset other people, especially people of different of a different color or different race. It's like, okay, I don't want to be so upset that I mess up my situation here to where I have a job. I can't go on a job angry and upset, so I have to push down everything that I'm feeling, um, so that I don't, rock the boat to say.
Yeah.
So I would say, that's a lot to say, but I would say it's exhausting, it's scary at times, um, and it is frustrating. I mean, you have this image that has been placed on black people in America. Have you heard about the film Birth of a Nation,
Yeah.
where they kind of like, things like that, to where it's like you're vilified, and it's like, I've never in my life tried to steal someone's purse, right? But then you have those situations to where you're in the elevator or you're at a store and you get followed. You have to teach your children, hey, when you get pulled over, keep your hands on the steering wheel. Maybe hold the keys out of the window when you get pulled over. Don't make any sudden movements. Don't even sneeze. It's like, just not to give a reason. And it's like it's a different set of rules and a different lifestyle, and yet we're all supposed to be citizens. But yes, it's two different worlds.
Yeah.
So I would say, I mean, it's not really concise and well put together, but that was, I was thinking about it last night. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Being
But
black in America.
that's great. And especially what you said there at the end kind of leads to what I want to ask next about this idea of, having these feelings, not wanting to disrupt these other relationships that you have. And so having to kind of suppress those feelings. When
Right.
you think about, now we're experiencing violent protest in our nation. Of course, I don't want to get into all this, but I was watching stuff yesterday, and it's so hard to categorize the protests because I saw things across the board.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff involved in that. But anyways, just thinking about the nonviolent ways of protesting, beginning with King,
Hmm.
in the '60s, and people coming out and saying, you shouldn't be doing this, or
Yeah.
why are you marching in the streets? But even today with Kaepernick, and
Hmm.
you shouldn't be kneeling, and even, uh, you think about the NBA players who are wearing the "I Can't Breathe" shirts, and get
Yeah.
pushed back because of that, or you say Black Lives Matter, and then people respond, no, all lives matter.
Yeah.
And so every form of nonviolent protest is condemned or not good enough. And so, uh, what does that mean for you?
And that right there, it's I would say it's frustrating too. It's when you see it and it's suppressed that way, or condemned. It's more frustrating than outright racism, right? When somebody's just being racist and they call you names that are derogatory based on your race, that stuff doesn't affect me as much as the, hey, your peaceful protesting doesn't matter. That's frustrating, because it's like when you try to do things the right way, it's like you don't have a voice. That's like in October, like when everybody wears the pink for, is it October? I think it's October. They wear their pink for breast cancer awareness, right?
Yeah.
It's like somebody coming up to someone, a woman who she's had a double mastectomy, and she's a survivor of breast cancer. She made it through chemotherapy, and then somebody coming and say, hey, prostate cancer matters too. And it's just like, man, this thing almost killed me. Like, this is real to me. This is something that's affecting me. That would be absurd for somebody to come to a breast cancer survivor and say, hey, prostate cancer matters too. It's like, it's the same. I think it's the same with black people and minorities, period. And it's just like, this right here is something people are dying because they are black. And it's odd to me, because I don't personally fear people based on what they look like, right? But it seems as though just being Black in America, for some people, that causes fear. You know, now I'm afraid of a lot of things. I'm afraid of spiders because of what they look like. You know, they look like little aliens, um, but people, you know, usually it's based on their actions with me. And so um, to have every form of peaceful protest condemned, that is frustrating. But I do believe that that is the means of which I think that's where this looting and all this other stuff is born through. I think there's other things too. I think there's other people who are taking advantage of the situation in order to loot and do things like that. They don't care about the cause. They just want free stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think that people are like, hey, we don't have a voice when we try to do it this way, you know? And then they see other things. Like one thing that was frustrating to me was to see how people went into in Michigan, I think it's Michigan, how you got the protesters who was ready for the state to open, and they go in, they're dressed like they're in Call of Duty or something, and they have guns and stuff, and I'm just like, man, you probably living in homes that you own, you know, you're having to stay inside your homes where you probably buy nice things, you know, have a TV on the wall, and you're just tired of being there. Whereas you have a group of people who are probably renting, you know, or if they live in the predicament to where they're in government housing. Government housing is not nice, you know, in most cases. I'll tell you, in my experiences, in living in government housing, they are not nice places to live. They're not the best living conditions. You have these people that live there, and not only do they live in that situation, they also have to go out into a world to which their culture is not widely accepted, put on a mask, pretend to be something so that they can keep a job, to barely make ends meet to go back into that terrible living condition. And then their brother or their son is killed for no reason, and nothing that resembles justice, you know, comes to fruition. Um, that is frustrating, you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me. You know. I think that's where they're at now. I don't condone the looting and stuff, but I mean, it's just I understand their frustration. And I don't think they have a proper outlet for it. That's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, and it's really hard to say something about it. You know, I watched all kinds of videos yesterday, and there's so much different things going on. I saw multiple videos of, you know, I saw there was a Black man in Nashville,
Mhm.
basically getting after some young white people and telling them not to damage stuff, you know,
Oh
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you're just hurting the cause. And they were just completely disrespecting him, you know. And I saw
Mhm.
other videos like that. There was, I can't remember one, but there was a white guy like basically damaging property, and the Black protesters came out and apprehended the guy and basically took him and handed him over to the police, you know.
Yeah,
And so yeah, it's very difficult, you know, to to say anything about it because there's all kinds of stuff going on now.
yeah. I think it's the same frustration. Like, is it's like if you don't like people who condemn the protests are telling you basically, um, be silent about what's going on with you. They're just telling you don't say anything. I don't think that's right. You know, we don't do that to our children. You know, kids they have issues in their life that are small to us, right? And it seems it seems small to us because we've dealt with larger things. Like they'll lose their favorite toy and they'll freak out about it, right? Well, in their life, according to their viewpoint, that's the biggest thing that's ever happened to them, you know? And I think if maybe we try to understand other people's point of view um, better, then that would help the conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think it would. Even if we don't agree, you know,
Yeah.
people don't agree, but just to simply let people be heard and to
Mhm.
seek to understand, you know, I think it would do
Right.
a lot for this country. My next question, and maybe you can relate to this, you know, I was thinking about how we minister at funerals, and funerals are always kind of awkward
Hmm.
because people want to say the right thing, but sometimes they come out and they say absolutely the wrong thing, even though
Right.
they're trying to do good. Or then some people, because they're so afraid of saying the wrong thing, they don't say anything at all. And I
Right.
see that somewhat, at least from my perspective, going on with some of these incidents, with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. I think that there are some white people who want to say the right thing, and sometimes they don't, or
Mhm.
they don't say anything at all just because they're so scared. And so I just want to ask you, what would be an appropriate response from white people to the death of George Floyd?
Right. So I there was something that I saw yesterday, and it was from Jordan Hubbard. You know Jordan Hubbard in Waco.
Yeah,
He posted something that I thought was profound. Um, he says, on Pentecost, the first gift God gave the church through the Holy Spirit was the power to listen and to understand. Now isn't the time to double down on what you know, to pick up sick means, to ponder opposition, or to listen to only the voices that reflect what you already know. This is a Pentecost moment. We need the Spirit to listen we need the Spirit to listen to understand. If you are a white person and don't understand, I urge you to listen to an African American friend, tell their story and how they are experiencing this. Ask the Spirit to help you to listen to understand. I thought that that was fantastic and well timed because I didn't have a good response. I wouldn't have had a great response for that. You know, uh, I think listening to understand is something that we often, I think all people in America find hard to do because most of the time we find ourselves listening to respond. I've done that before. I see that a lot when I teach classes where I'm teaching and someone has their hand up. They don't have their hand up to talk about what I'm talking about. They have their hand up so they can put in their 2 cents, you know. Uh, and then, also I saw a quote that also spoke to the situation. This quote stated, first, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. That's a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. As he's in jail in solitary confinement in 1963. 57 years ago, he writes that, and I think 57 years ago, and it's still relevant today. I really connected with that quote.
yeah. One of the things I think about is something like this happens, and you see a lot of people sharing Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, and which is good.
Mhm.
But I kind of wish that if you're going to share a quote by Dr. King, that you would go back and read or listen to some of the other speeches, and not just get a snippet,
Yeah.
but get a full understanding of what he's saying. Because I'm not sure that everybody really grasps the entirety of his
Mhm.
message.
Yeah, yeah. It's the pieces that are easily digestible. Like I went back and I read that letter because it's long, it's super long, but he's speaking um, to the situation that's happening today in 2020. Basically, he's saying we've to tell someone to wait. It's just it's unacceptable at that time and today. It's just like there. something needs to happen. I don't know what that something is, but something has got to happen. And I believe that it should, and it can start with the church and God's people. Uh, I really do believe that. But I think an appropriate response is to listen, you know? I think it's just to listen.
Good.
You know?
And that leads me to our final question here. I want to end on a more positive note and a productive note.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are both ministers. You know, we're
Right.
devoted to the church, and we believe that Christianity can make a difference not only in the lives of individuals, but in the lives of this world, this nation. And so, what can the church, maybe the church whole, local congregations, whatever, what can we do to help race relations in America? I mean, you can speak to this, but I believe that true change has to come from the church. I don't think it's going to come from government. You know,
Yeah.
so
I don't think so.
yeah,
I totally agree with you. I tell my congregation this all the time. I don't, because in this world, not just America, because the world doesn't all submit to God wholeheartedly, I don't believe that we're going to see uh, an end to racism in this time. I don't think that we see the end in this time. I do believe um, that racism doesn't exist in the kingdom of God. For those people who have chosen to obey the will of God, I do believe that among that group of people, that racism doesn't exist. I do believe that racism has a homestead in America. It's ingrained in who we are. I mean, it was built that way. You know, it's passed down from generation to generation. But I think that if the church can be more committed to Christ than we are to country, more committed to Christ than we are to race group, more committed to Christ than we are culture, we can beat that thing. Because really, the, the 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 wall of partition or the things that separate us is already torn down, but we put it back up. We build a new wall and we say this is the wall of country, this is the wall of politics, this is the wall of race, this is the wall of culture, this is the wall of how we do things, how we worship. Man, we can tear that thing down and give an actual example of what heaven is going to look like right here and now. And I think that's the way that we address the problem, by showing them, look, there is a solution, right? It is possible to exist with one another and have all things in common, because as Christians, we do, you know, we do have all things in common through God. I also think I would add to this. I would say that men who stand behind the podium have to be more responsible with what they say. I saw a lot of online worship services yesterday, some from people who I'm friends with, that I was really disappointed in, because it did nothing to speak to the peace and the unity that's provided by God. All it did was stir the pot, you know. And I'm not saying to erase who you are as a person. I can't stop being black. I'm going to, whether or not people recognize that I'm a child of God, I can't stop being a black man. You know, there are going to be times where I have to uh, exist. I have to just try my best to exist by doing certain things. You know, like I talked about with how you behave with police officers, no matter what. I'm not saying all police officers are evil or bad, but that's just what I've been taught. What's been ingrained. It's what is safe for me to do in order to exist. But for someone to stand behind the pulpit and rile people up, you know, and not point them towards God to say, hey, let's be Christians, you know, because the other stuff is going to lead to more people dying. It's going to lead to a greater perception that black people are bad people, and it's not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. I understand it's frustrating. I understand um, that it's time for this to be over. 401 years later, it's time for it to be over. But we're not made to be a part of this world, you know. And I know that a lot of people, they hear the message of Christianity, a lot of black people, you know, and they prefer the message of the Black Israelite movement, where you as a black person call yourself God and you say that the black people are the actual chosen people of God, but that's just another form of racism, you know? And sometimes I believe that sometimes black people believe that they can't be racist, and that's not true. That's just how I feel about it. Some people may feel differently about it, but I think that we can do something to address the problem of race by being Christians first. Being
Yeah,
Christians first.
that's so great. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I appreciate your ministry, appreciate who you are. And, you know,
Thank you.
wish there were more ministers like you, because I think that, you know, what you are doing is making a difference in Temple, Texas. And, you know, not only there, but, you know, this will be released out social media. And so other people can see it and view it and to listen, as you say, and hopefully can catch on, and other people will continue to do the same in their own ministries. And, you know, as much bad stuff as we've seen happen over the last few weeks, I've also seen a lot of good. And so,
Right.
you know, just try to, as you say, give people the point people to the right direction, you know, point them to the cross and the reconciliation there, and you know, try to be the change that we want to be in the world. So,
Right, right. I think that, you know, sometimes social media is great, especially during this time. I think if we didn't have social media, I don't know how we would have continued to have services and things like that. But I think it's also taken away the ability for us to have real conversations. You
yeah,
know, a conversation on Facebook is not the same as, you know, us having a dialogue and reasoning with each other, you know. It
yeah,
can't just be I said what I said and that's it. That's not a conversation, you know. So yeah, we got to sit down. We got to talk and
oh
hear
yeah,
each other out.
yeah. Yeah, it doesn't replace that. You know, it is this great tool that you can reach a lot of people, but it's also a very dangerous thing, you know, and so it's demands some responsibility on our part.
Yeah,
And you know, I talked a little bit about this yesterday in my sermon, but you just think about James chapter 3 and what he says about the tongue. It's the same thing in
yeah.
social media. It's just a different form, you know, and
Oh yeah,
you see those fires everywhere, you know.
yeah.
So,
The adversary knows what he's doing. He'll use it for his purposes
yeah.
as well. So
Well, thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate you, and appreciate you taking the time to educate us and share, you know, your thoughts with us today.
thank you.